We spoke and heard from victim service providers and advocates here in the Fox Valley area. I want to thank everybody who joined us and who was part of that conversation, not only for being here, but more importantly for the work that you do day in and day out to serve victims of crime in Wisconsin. Now, this week is National Crime Victims' Rights Week. That's a time to honor and support victims of crime, to identify barriers to justice and work to eliminate them, and to recognize the critical services that crime victims rely on. And there's good news here in Wisconsin, which is that we have made real progress in supporting victims of crime in recent decades. We have added constitutional protections and statutory protections to our law. New programs have been developed that support crime victims. And I think there is a key understanding within the justice system that, as I believe Robin put it before, to get complete justice in a case, you need to make sure that victim services is able to help victims of crime get justice. But at the same time, progress in the state of Wisconsin is at risk. Victim service providers around Wisconsin are facing a funding crisis. Historically, one of the largest sources of victim service funding has been VOCA, federal funding through the Victim of Crime Act. And for about a 5-year period in Wisconsin, we were able to provide about $44 million in either VOCA funding or a combination of VOCA and ARPA, COVID relief funding, to victim service providers around Wisconsin. But in the current federal fiscal year, which began on October 1st, the amount of VOCA funding available has dropped to $13 million. So from about $44 million a year for a 5-year period to $13 million. That has led to, in some cases, dramatic cuts in funding for victim service organizations. That's meant fewer staff for some organizations, reduced hours, eliminated programs, and survivors, victims of crime, having to wait longer for services. One of the themes I think came through very clearly in the discussion we had today was that victim service programs are stretched to the breaking point right now. And they need the influx of funds that we are requesting in the state budget to continue not just surviving and getting by, but to getting back to really serving victims as effectively as possible in Wisconsin. Now, victim service organizations support victims in a variety of important ways. They run domestic violence shelters, they help crime victims prepare safety plans, which can help keep people safe, and they provide crisis response services, among many other things. With this reduction in funding, we've asked for a substantial investment in state funding. Wisconsin DOJ's proposed budget would invest approximately $68 million in state funding over a 2-year period to support community victim service providers and maintain victim service positions at the Wisconsin Department of Justice. We need to make sure that when someone is in crisis, help is available, and that when someone has the courage to speak up or to seek safety, that the system is ready to respond and provide the support that they need. And I want to add that investing in victim services isn't just the right thing to do because of the obligation we owe to victims. It's also an essential investment in public safety. When survivors are supported, they're more likely to report crimes, to cooperate in prosecutions, and to begin to heal, and as we heard people talk about today, break cycles of violence to prevent crime from happening in the future. And that makes our communities in Wisconsin safer and stronger. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Outagamie County DA, Mindy Templis. Mindy?
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Mindy Templis, the District Attorney for Outagamie County and the President of the Wisconsin District Attorneys Association. I want to thank everybody who came here to share information today. As we observe National Crime Victim Rights Week, we reflect on the important progress that we've made in securing the rights of victims, including the constitutional passing of Marsy's Law just 5 years ago. We recognize, though, today that there is still a lot of work to do. It's a time this week also to honor the victims' rights movement that began back in 1981, and a reminder that we have a collective responsibility in order to be able to protect victims, break down barriers, and support victims of all crimes. I'd like to take a moment to thank the Attorney General for joining us today and to help raise awareness for Crime Victims' Rights Week with all of us and the important work that's being done here in Outagamie County in the Fox Valley. His presence here today continues to illustrate the shared commitment we all have to ensuring that victims receive the support and the justice that they deserve. In Outagamie County, we are very fortunate because we have a strong network of organizations, dedicated individuals who support victims at the moment that a crime happens, sometimes without it ever being reported, throughout the criminal justice process and beyond. Those services help each and every victim who is in our court system, as well as services for those who are not yet ready to report victimization, but need support and resources towards their journey to healing. Our community is incredibly fortunate to have organizations that prioritize victims' needs, respecting their experiences and ensuring that they can fully exercise their rights at every single stage. These efforts are crucial not only for victims, but for the strength of our community, the healing of the victims and our neighbors that we have, and the entire health and well-being of the Fox Valley. I want to take a moment to highlight some of the exceptional services that Outagamie County has and who lead this support for victims. Our Victim Crisis Response Team is available 24/7 to provide immediate support and comfort and resources to victims in the aftermath of an incident. Sergeant Duvin and K9 Edison, a facility dog, are invaluable in helping victims feel safe and comforted during interviews while they're reporting, and even sit with some victims on the stand during trial as victims are testifying to what happened to them. These are some of the most difficult moments of people's lives. The Victim Witness Team in Outagamie County District Attorney's Office works tirelessly to ensure that victims are informed and empowered throughout the criminal justice process. In 2024, this team notified 3,200 new victims about the status of their case. They sent over 5,700 hearing notifications to ensure that victims knew when and where they could attend a court hearing regarding their case. More importantly, our Victim Witness Program also partners with other organizations like Harbor House, the Child Advocacy Center, REACH, Christine Ann, Diverse and Resilient, We All Rise, People of Progression, and many others to ensure that victims have access to vital support services. This is truly life-changing work. These programs provide essential resources and support that are critical to the safety, health, and well-being of our community at every age, from infants to the older adults in our community. By helping victims not only recover but regain their voice, these services build trust in the justice system, foster stronger communities, and ensure that justice is truly served. However, we're at this critical juncture now that just 5 years after passing Marsy's Law and elevating victims' rights to a constitutional level, many of these vital programs are facing significantly reduced funding, which threatens to undermine the progress that we've made and impact their ability to serve victims. As we continue to move forward in the budget process, it is imperative that the state step forward to and continue to invest in these programs in the coming years. As the District Attorney for Outagamie County and President of the Wisconsin District Attorneys Association, I'm proud to support the Criminal Justice Coalition's budget proposal, which advocates for state funding to sustain and enhance the work of victim witness programs and the victim service providers, not in just Outagamie County, but across the state of Wisconsin. These services are a lifeline for victims, and the justice system is only as strong as it supports its offers to those it serves. Thank you.
I'm Robin Scott. I'm with We All Rise African American Resource Center, and we are one of the victim service providers that provide services in Green Bay, Wisconsin, so specific to Brown County. But we see survivors from all over that are calling to receive culturally specific services. We believe in our approach, like a cultural, community, and clinical approach to healing for those that are impacted by violence. And the way that violence shows up, it manifests in multiple different forms. And so that is domestic violence and sexual assault. There are financial crimes and mass violence that happens. And it's our responsibility as the service provider to be open and to be available and to meet the needs of those that have been harmed. And so when a person calls We All Rise, for instance, they have access to 24-hour crisis line. They have access to walk into our doors 9 to 5 a.m., 4 days a week, and 8 to 5 p.m. to be provided a crisis intake and services. In addition to that, we support young people with prevention and intervention-based services where we're helping them to restore their lives. We're typically their first introduction to healthy relationship conversations and the reparation and the path to healing that's necessary after they've been either the direct victim or a witness to different crimes that have happened in their homes and in their communities. And so it's our responsibility to work collaboratively with the other victim service providers in order to, quite frankly, save lives. And so when a person is dealt with mass violence in their community, when a person is dealt with sexual assault, who do they turn to provide to get the essential services that they need? The clinical mental health services, the crisis and emotional support services, the housing services that are paramount to their recovery and their ability to stay free of their perpetrators. It's our jobs to be on the front line and to provide those services and to, quite frankly, work with the other service providers that are already very limited in our abilities to do the work. And so for a long time, we've been doing a lot more with a lot less. And so cuts to this services quite literally means a loss of lives in our communities and inability to be able to serve people that are most vulnerable and most impacted. We were looking towards the future of being able to expand, to be more responsive to the uptake that we see in crime that happens in our communities, the exasperation of mental health as a result of the pandemic and as a result of just everything that's happening in our world right now. And it doesn't feel like we can be responsive to that when we are dealing with budget cuts and quite frankly, like our services, they're a need to have for the community. We are the linkage that, in addition to the court system and the healthcare system, victim services are practitioners and clinicians, and we're the linkage for survivors having the ability to heal.
Good afternoon. My name is Reiko Ramos, and I'm the statewide anti-violence program director at Diverse and Resilient. We're an LGBTQ nonprofit and public health organization with offices in Milwaukee and Appleton, and I'm based here in Appleton. And we work to achieve health equity and improve the safety and well-being of LGBTQ people across Wisconsin. We see a future in which LGBTQ people in Wisconsin thrive, living healthy, satisfying lives and safe, supportive communities. Here in the Fox Valley area, Milwaukee, and statewide, our anti-violence program focuses on serving survivors of violence, including domestic violence, sexual assault, and community and hate-based violence, and many of whom are also LGBTQ or HIV-affected folks. VOCA funding allows us to provide crucial emotional support, advocacy services, emergency hotel and financial assistance to survivors of violence. These are much needed, especially at a time when targeted violence against our community is on the rise. In our field, we know that there's never been enough funding in our state to support programs in meeting the needs of survivors, especially those experiencing violence at the intersection of other forms of oppression. And in an already high burnout field, the effect of steep funding cuts have put an immense strain on all programs to maintain a full and healthy staff and keep their lights on in order to continue to provide these life-saving victim services. We just had a meeting with community programs where folks are talking about staff reductions, high turnover, high burnout, long waiting lists, the need to refer out to other services. But who do we refer out to when all victim services, all nonprofit organizations and helping folks working in helping professions are unable to support folks' safety needs, basic needs, and operating with the threat of funding cuts and scarcity. We rely on each other to provide, to holistically meet the needs of all survivors. So when one of our programs suffer, we all suffer. We're less able to respond to crises and provide timely services in situations where earlier intervention could have maybe even prevented further violence. So where I want to end is, we can talk about budget cuts in terms of numbers, in terms of percentages. We can talk about the effects on programs all day long, but I want to remind folks that it will always be survivors who pay the ultimate price, right? So we can pay for it in dollars now, or as a colleague in our movement has recently said, we can pay for it in bodies. Thank you.
Just to quickly wrap up and then we'll open up for questions, I wanted to say thank you again to the Outagamie County DA's office for hosting this meeting, and particularly the DA Templis for her advocacy for alongside us for investments in victim services. I want to thank all of the advocates who are here, both for your participation in this discussion, but more importantly, for the work that you do. And I do want to say to the Fox Valley community, having heard from some of the victim service providers in this area about the work they do, folks are lucky to have passionate, dedicated victim advocates who are working to help survivors heal and to help ensure that there is justice in cases that take place. And I think as a state, we've got an obligation to support that work. So we look forward to continue advocating in the budget. With that, we're happy to open it up to questions. I'm happy to take off-topic questions, but I will ask to take those afterwards if you have them.
Josh, certainly, of course, the current climate at the state and also the federal level legislatively, you set up some big goals there. This is what we'd like to have. Getting something in the bottom line, you're not going to get exactly what you do. That's just the whole legislative process. Do you have a plan in place, thinking, okay, maybe if we can get this, we can do this and move ahead a little bit, try to get at least a partial victory?
Well, first I would say that the amount that we've requested is closely tied to the amount of the reduction in VOCA funding, and we as a state have been fortunate to rely significantly on federal funding to support victim services for years, but with the significant reduction in federal funding, now is the time, I believe, for the state to step up. I am having conversations with legislators. I know DA Templis is having conversations with legislators. And I know that victim advocates around the state are raising awareness about this issue. We're at a point where we have a very significant state surplus, and one of the things that we are hoping is that we will see an investment in the upcoming state budget in victim services. Now, that being said, we're always happy to have dialogue with legislators to try to figure out how we can reach solutions that will ensure that victim services remain funded. But one thing that's, I think, really encouraging about the possibility of getting victim services funded in the upcoming state budget is that there's broad-based support for this kind of investment. Victim services coalitions around the state have weighed in support. But so, of course, you're hearing from DA Templis and me, but the Wisconsin Chiefs of Police Association supports this investment, the Badger State Sheriff's Association, and others. So, I'm optimistic that we will make progress, but of course, you never know until you see what happens in the legislative process. Do you want to add anything to that?
No, I think to the Attorney General's point is the Justice Coalition comprised of the Wisconsin District Attorneys Association, the Association State Prosecutor, the court system, the State Public Defender's Office, and Department of Justice. We've band together to talk about what are the priorities for the system to work. We can't individually just be funded. We have to look at what is going to make the system work. And there are some really, really critical priorities in terms of victim services and ensuring constitutional rights for victims are able to be supported in we have the work and the organizations and staff to be able to do the work. On the flip side, there's constitutional rights to defendants, and we need funding for adequate public defenders so that we're not waiting and making victims wait a long time for their court hearings. We also need funding for prosecutors in order to maintain prosecutors and not have the turnover that we have, and because our numbers are we're so short-staffed. So there are priorities in all of us that we look at from the coalition's perspective of what is necessary to make Wisconsin's justice system work. And this is a victim services one that all of those organizations are fully behind and supportive of.
So if you don't get the funding you need, will there be a rollback of services, or will any of these services be in jeopardy?
The short answer is yes. So we, as I mentioned before, this is the first federal fiscal year. It started October 1st, where we've had this significant reduction in services. And I've had the opportunity to talk to victim service providers around the state, and they are cutting back on staff, services. Just today, for example, we heard about the elimination of some positions. We also heard about a lack of resources to do the kind of prevention interventions that can help prevent crime in the future. The staff here at the Outagamie County DA's office was talking about how they've taken on, they're right now in the process, I think, of getting training on safety planning, which was something that they didn't have to take on before because they could count on victim service groups to provide that. But now that there's not as much certainty that those services will be provided. And of course, that means that they're being taken away from the other critical work that they're doing to help make the justice system work. And so the overall theme, and I mentioned it before, is that these organizations are at the breaking point right now. And the longer we are in this funding shortfall position, the more impact there's going to be, and ultimately what that's going to mean is reduced service and ultimately reduced effectiveness of the justice system for victims. And I know that nobody up here wants to see that happen.
One off-topic question. Do you have any idea what happened with those student visas in the UW system that were revoked? Or do you plan to challenge that with the president or with ICE? Or do you have any information at all about that, or what you might do as a result?
Right now it's UW who, if anybody has information, it would be UW. And so I, at this point, don't have any update on that.
About the roundtable, can you mention some of the specifics that were brought up in some of those conversations?
Yeah, absolutely. There was a lot, and if a few of you would like to speak to some of the things you shared, you're certainly welcome to. But one of the things we heard programs talk about is, and there are a bunch of folks here if you want to follow up with some of them, I'm hopeful some of them will be happy to chat, but we heard about the services they're providing and the impact that those services have. And as you've heard some folks talk about, victim services can be life-changing, and in some cases, life-saving for people. Sometimes people are willing to speak about victimization from crimes in a way that they never have before, which can lead to them engaging with the justice system and perpetrators being held accountable. They can help ensure that safety planning occurs so that somebody who might be in danger is able to develop a plan that keeps them safe. Victim witness programs help ensure that witnesses or victims of crime who are testifying at trial get the support that they need to get through what can be a really daunting process for folks who are not used to engaging in the justice system. And because of the cuts, there have been impacts, in some cases directly on organizations, and in other cases on organizations that they partner with, which has caused cutbacks to happen or caused there to be reductions in services. And that impacts, again, prevention efforts as well as efforts to serve victims. Do either of you want to speak a little bit to that, or Mindy, if you'd like?
Well, one, I think you are saying a lot of what was said today at the roundtable, in addition to the fact that I feel like there's no happy ending without victim service provision. We've talked about our responsibility, but this means that people are that have been recently victimized are on the streets, that their mental health issues are exacerbated by homelessness or the thought of safety. It means the inability to help with restraining orders, and a loss of the legacy that we're trying to build as it relates to all of the services in our community, as well as being a culturally specific victim service provider. There's a lot of our clients that are doing the first thing for the first time. And so we've had, historical issues as it relates to systemic inequities that exist within the Black community and in various systems. And our job is to help bridge that gap, is to help create unapologetic safety for those that we serve. And so we've been committed to doing that. And when you bring folks forward, and when we've had the funding now to bring folks to that place where we're introducing them to clinical mental health services, where we're able to provide transitional housing, where we're able to pick up our crisis line at 3 o'clock in the morning, that may be the difference between them being there for their children tomorrow or not. To break that, quite frankly, is breaking lineages. And destroying households, and there's no happy ending without victim service providers. We cannot be a healthy community without the ability for all of us to call Harbor House or Christine Ann, or to do co-advocacy with people of progression and diverse and resilient. And so we're thinking about the layers and the various ways that we all show up, and the intersectionality of human beings. And it's our job to be responsive to that and to provide the absolute best service to those that have been victimized, and so that we don't see cycles repeated, and so that we don't see their children suffering from the impact of crime and the things that have happened to them at the hands of their perpetrators. It's our job to be able to support and stand alongside those folks in those situations. And we just want to be able to do that and continue that our part in this ecosystem of services that are necessary within the criminal justice system.
Thanks, everyone.
All right, thanks, everybody.
If I can have the group stay up real quick for a moment.